Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business. Bills. First readings. The Development Bank Amendment Bill 2016.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time, is now set down for a second reading.
The Data Protection Bill 2016.
This bill has been deemed to have been read the first time, is now set down for a second reading. Sorry, member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I see, and I'm merely raising a procedural matter, I see on the order paper where this bill is listed as the first reading.
Which one, the first or the second one?
The data,
Number 2.
the data protection bill, and this was published on the 1st of April 2016. That's a year ago. And obviously, we don't have the bill. I see where we have this green paper, but it's, can someone explain why is it that we don't have a bill? And then, Madam Speaker, if I may, there is one listed on the, under committee on the bills, committee on bills, which is the non-profit organizational bill 2016, and that went through its stages. I don't know, might have been recommittal of bills. That, pardon me, that in October, that went through those stages. Can somebody explain on those two particular bills, these two particular bills, what is happening?
Recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm not so sure I understand the question as it relates to the data protection bill. Well, I have a bill that was gazetted, supplement number 4, published with the Extraordinary Gazette number 22, dated 1st of April 2016. And I have a copy.
Honorable member from Northside, Seam said district. I said that in jest. Honorable member from Easton, you're not the only person not in possession of the green bill. The chair doesn't have it. It's been photocopied, and I'm reliably informed that there's no actual green bill. Now, I know what your next question is going to be, so please direct it to the right person this time.
Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, here is my concern. If the bill was gazetted a year ago, we are just receiving it. Has there been any changes since a year ago compared with the one that was gazetted? I.e., further consultation, deferral thereof, further consultation, and if that has been incorporated in this one now. Because I don't know if that is, what the status would be on that particular matter.
Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since the bill has been published, or I can say, it was, so as I recall, on the business paper of this House, and it was deferred sometime last year, I think it was, for further consultation. Since then, further consultations have taken place, but the bill itself has not changed. The outcome of those consultations are being dealt with by, hoping to be dealt with by way of committee stage amendments. So this is the bill in its original form as was published.
Can I just ask you, Honorable H.U., where did you get your copy of the bill from? Is there more copies that the members can get?
I got it in the mail, yeah. I think I got it in the mail. The usual thing.
Member from Easton, did you have a follow-up or you're finished?
Madam Speaker, I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just that 1 year is a long time that we haven't had a copy of a gazettal printed by a authorized printer. I believe that the term is in the law. And here we are 1 year later, and I know, Madam Speaker, we have to trust somebody, but Madam Speaker, I will leave that one, but I certainly want to know why we are recommitting a bill to committee stage on the non-profit. Madam Speaker, I'll wait till the Attorney General says it on the mic.
Madam
The
Speaker,
Honorable Attorney General.
I'm happy to do that. I'm subject to your ruling. I just think that's something we should discuss when we get to committee. Since it is not part of the first reading, not part of the second reading, it's way down the committee stage. So.
The chair would very much like to acquiesce to your request. The difficulty is that because the member has raised it on a procedural stage, if we wait till we got a committee and it was decided that it should have taken another route, they might have lost their opportunity to so do. But I am open to your legal advice.
No,
if you would switch a different cap on at this stage.
Madam Speaker, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just simply saying that the bill as it is now is not properly before us, really, for discussion. It's not part of the first reading, which is where we're at, not part of the second reading.
No, I understand that, Honorable Attorney General.
It is going to be discussed in a completely different format.
Madam Speaker, if I may help. Madam
Member
Speaker,
from Easton.
Madam Speaker, every member of this honorable House is required to know what they are reviewing. And the process is a first reading, second reading, committee, report, and third reading. We cannot, Madam Speaker, be seeing a bill reappearing on the order paper under the committee section when it's only this Parliament can recommit a bill. Show me where it can be done under any other circumstance.
Members, the chair would sincerely seek the indulgence of members to deal with this on Friday morning, and let's continue with the debate. It is a procedural point, and the chair takes note of the situation. I understand the direction that both sides are going, but can we deal with it on Friday morning instead? Member from Easton. Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, I am satisfied with your ruling and your request that you have made to the Honourable House. However, I would like to come back to it because no bills must come to this House unless they go through their proper readings. Unless the governor has not assented thereto, then the governor must send it back with recommendations on the amendments. And I leave it right there. Well, if it's not amendments, we deal with it the way we see appropriate.
Members, we will continue with the debate. The matter, Madam Clerk, please make a note that the matter should come back up on Friday morning when it can be aired fully. Both sides will have an opportunity to put their position. The chair will make a ruling. Does any other, sorry, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Second readings, the Legal Practitioners Bill 2016, continuation of second reading debate.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the debate on this most important piece of legislation, the Legal Practitioners Bill 2016, has been long, difficult, angry at times, Madam Speaker. But I don't doubt ever, Madam Speaker, that however they go about it, all members of this Honourable House really do want to do the right thing by Cayman and by Caymanians. How we get there sometimes is a long and winding road, and often in this thing called democracy, we tend to employ methods which perhaps are, on an objective analysis, not necessarily the best way forward. But Madam Speaker, I am happy to say to the House and to the broader public that in the lengthy break which we just had for dinner, the opportunity was taken on behalf of all members of the House to talk about the way forward. And I am satisfied, although I will ask, Madam Speaker, at the appropriate time for the Leader of the Opposition and the fifth elected member for Georgetown to indicate on behalf of their respective groups, teams, that they are in agreement, that we have agreed to meet to discuss the proposed amendments of the government and the opposition tomorrow in lieu of the regular meeting of the House, with a view to narrowing the issues between us and in the hope that we can significantly shorten the committee stage process of the bill, and that it is proposed that following the conclusion of the debate on the bill this evening, but prior to the actual commencement of the winding up by the Minister for Financial Services, the House will adjourn to allow that discussion on the committee stage amendments to proceed in camera, and that debate will then, the winding up will then resume on the bill on Friday morning. And so, Madam Speaker, I am greatly encouraged, despite a number of false starts and attempts, not false attempts, and false starts in getting there. I do believe that we will get there. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding that, I do wish to speak about a range of matters relating to this legal practitioners bill and the issues around the legal profession in these islands, and particularly the issues relating to discrimination against Caymanians. And I won't say allegations because I know them to be real. I can't know each and every single one that has representation that has been made to me to be real, because I don't know those personal circumstances that are described. I can only take the word of those who have written them. But I've been engaged in the legal profession in these islands, or I was, from 1983 to 2005, and I was president of the Bar Association for 2 years. I have a wife who's a lawyer, and as I indicated in the previous debate, I have a son who is almost one. So I'm still very much connected to the profession. But Madam Speaker, before I get there, I think I need, without any acrimony, I hope, I need to set the record straight with respect to the acrimonious issue of the drafting of the legal practitioners bill that is before us, and who was present and who agreed, and what the process was, and how we decided about who should pay for it. Madam Speaker, the member from East End described the way that we went about this as irregular and unprecedented, and I forget which other adjectives he used. But Madam Speaker, let me just say that I am not one who believes very much in informality when it comes to business. Those who were and who are a member of my administration and the government, the civil servants, the public servants who work with us, and the countless number of people who make presentations to the caucus of this government will understand that we have a formal process of agreeing policy in my administration. Madam Speaker, this was a discipline that was not easily taught, even to members on my side who were unused to such a structure. But I was part of a previous administration in which things were not quite so formally done, and I did not like this idea of ministers fighting with each other in cabinet, in the presence of the governor, official members, and civil servants. And any issues, battles that we have about policy ought to take place in the context of a caucus where we can hammer these issues out. I don't think I have had a single cabinet meeting that has lasted more than 2.5 hours. Usually significantly less. And that's not because we don't consider issues carefully. It's because the hard work has been done in caucus. Caucus rarely finishes before 6 o'clock, sometimes much later, and we start at midday. We keep, Madam Speaker, a record of what we've talked about and decided in the caucus, and we also confirm that in a formal way at the next meeting. Madam Speaker, a great deal was said about by the 5th elected member for Georgetown and the 4th elected member for Bordentown. Particularly, the 4th elected member for Bordentown said he was unhappy. I think he used a stronger word, but I can't remember precisely what it was. No one misquote him. That these sorts of decisions about paying for the drafting of the bill were taken behind his back without him knowing. Madam Speaker, I asked my senior legal advisor, who acts as secretary to the caucus, to retrieve the records of senior political advisor. Sorry, the poor AG was thinking I was talking about him. Madam Speaker, at the meeting of the 8th of September 2014 of the caucus of this administration, at which were present myself, the Deputy Premier, the Honorable Minister for Planning, the Honorable Minister for Community Services, the Honorable Minister for Finance, the Honorable Minister for Financial Services, the Honorable Minister for Education, the Deputy Speaker, Councillor, I should call him by his correct title here. He is the 6th elected member for Georgetown, the 4th elected member for Bordentown, the 5th elected member for Georgetown, and the 2nd elected member for Georgetown, and the chairman of the party, Stanton Duckworth. For those who might be struggling with all of that, who is who, the 4th elected member for Bordentown was then Councillor Alva Saku, and the 5th elected member for Georgetown was then Councillor Winston Connolly. Madam Speaker, under the heading Legal Practitioners Bill, I'll read the whole thing. Minister Panton advised that he has discussed with the Premier and asked for the Premier to help move this forward. Also noted concerns of some in the judiciary who acknowledged the mature approach but mentioned a few areas that could be considered. Noted that the Cayman Law Society and Cayman Bar Association have agreed to pay for the drafting. But first they are seeking guidance from caucus cabinet regarding some areas. We'll need to spend one caucus session of several hours looking at this. Roy Tatum to look to see what can be done to set a day with no presentations. Anticipating that if all goes well, this may get passed in the LA end of Q1 next year at the earliest. Noted that once caucus was happy, then the Cayman Islands Law Society and the CBA will take the proposals to their bodies. Madam Speaker, the next mention of this by the caucus, 6th of October 2014. Members of the caucus present, myself, the Honourable Minister for Planning, the Honourable Minister for Community Services, the Honourable Minister for Financial Services, the Honourable Minister for Education, the 6th elected member for Georgetown, the 4th elected member for Bodden Town, the 5th elected member for Georgetown, the 2nd elected member for Georgetown, and the chairman. Legal Practitioners Bill. Premier reminded members of where things were at and that the proposal is to start the process over and to create a fresh bill rather than trying to fix the previous versions, which all had issues. We need to review and see if we can approve the position paper and provide any feedback so that the legal fraternity could hire someone to provide a draft bill. Our role is not to try to draft the bill here, but to agree policies and principles on what the bill should do. Premier noted his two concerns are: one, licensing of overseas lawyers who practice Cayman law, and two, that we need to ensure that Cayman attorneys have a fair chance to enter the profession and have upward mobility. A member noted that despite the fact that we cannot eliminate overseas lawyers, we should try to incentivize the work to be done here rather than overseas. This would be better for Caymanians and also for the economy generally. Agreed that we need to allow for overseas lawyers, but they need to come to Cayman and be called to the bar. There may be other requirements as well. Discussion around providing opportunities for Caymanians to serve overseas. Providing proper exposure should be standard training for Caymanians. Varied discussion on how to ensure Caymanians have opportunity to become equity partners. Varied discussion on how to ensure Caymanians have opportunity to become equity partners. Suggestion is to have improved regime that can keep tabs on whether law firms are doing what is needed to train Caymanians and to provide them with opportunities for equity partners. Concerns expressed as to whether the Business Staffing Plan Board is able to manage the process. A member suggested that we ask them to get on with the drafting and advise what the concerns are and see how they resolve it in the draft bill provided. Noted that the legal fraternity will need to get sign-off as well from their members before proceeding. Madam Speaker, I did that, or had that research done, and I've read that note of the discussions in the caucus of this administration on the 6th of October 2014 and the 8th of September 2014 and the 6th of October 2014. Because anyone listening to the impassioned debate and the protest by the 4th elected member for Bodden Town and the 5th elected member for Georgetown would have concluded, must have concluded, that they were not privy to any of this and to how the government wound up doing what we did in terms of the development of the adoption with amendment of the joint position paper of the CBA and the CILS, and the decision also that they be invited to pay for the cost of having a specialist drafts person carry out this work. As I said, Madam Speaker, I'm not going to make any more of it than that. But the suggestion that somehow we were underhanded, some of us obviously were underhanded in the way we went about this process, had to be addressed. Those members know me and know that whatever they may think of me, guile is not something that comes naturally to me. And I have, in almost 4 years, never attempted to hide from any member of my team or to proceed down some particular path with respect to a policy or a position without advising them and in every instance attempting to get everybody on board. I am by nature, in terms of my leadership style, a consensus builder. That's just naturally how I am. And that's what I did in this instance. It's what I've done in every instance. It doesn't always succeed, but I try. I try really, really hard. So, Madam Speaker, I hope that some of the mystique about the process has been put to bed in that regard. Madam Speaker, few things have irked me more in my years in public service than the impression given by the debate that has ensued, not just in this House in recent weeks, but over the course of the last year plus. And the suggestion, which has unfortunately taken root, that I and others on my side don't care about Caymanians and the Caymanian lawyer in particular, or the Caymanian aspiring lawyer, as the case may be. And that somehow we have thrown in our lot with what is perceived to be the big firms, which are, in most people's view, generally owned by foreigners, notwithstanding the fact that many of them now have Caymanian status. Madam Speaker, I can't begin to tell you what that has done to me, especially because I know many of those on the other side who have made those, I can't say they made those assertions. I've never heard anybody, and I'm careful with what I say directly on the other side that Alden this or Alden that. But the number of people who have come to me and said that they have heard memos on the other side suggest this or suggest that. When I know, Madam Speaker, that everyone on the other side, every one of them, know what Alden McLaughlin is made of, and even if they do not know intimately how I came up, they know generally. Madam Speaker, when I left high school, I went to work for government. I got a position which I couldn't believe they would give to a 19-year-old, but they did. I wasn't even 19 yet, I was 18. I would be 19, I got the job in July, and I was 19 in September. Assistant labor officer, had not a clue what it was. 1 year later, because of circumstances, I wound up over the court's office. I was 18, 19, 20, I was 21 that September that they appointed me as deputy clerk of the court with absolutely zero legal knowledge. That was 1981. As I said before, the people who have had the great influence over my legal training and development in every single instance has been a foreigner. I have struggled over the last few days to think of which Caymanian lawyer or judge or anything like that had any real influence on the course of my life and my career. I couldn't find anyone. Madam Speaker, it was Mrs. Ina Blanche Allen, who was a former High Court judge from Jamaica, who came here as a clerk of the court in 1982. that first insisted that I had to go to law school. I resisted. Law school started that year, 1982. I wound up in the second year, 1983, as her article clerk. I was encouraged not just by her, but by Peter Rowe, who was then Director of Legal Studies. He's now Dr. Peter Rowe, retired happily from the University of Liverpool. I had to leave government because of the oppressive requirements at the time that they insisted that article clerks had to sign huge bonds and a committal to stay with government for a minimum of 5 years when you finish law school. I went into the private sector. Charles Adams, the late Colin Charles Adams, is who offered me my first position. I stayed with that firm from the 1st of April 1984, until I became a minister following the elections in 2005. Charles Adams, Graham Ritchie, Pierre Lamontagne QC, to a lesser extent, Raymond Alberga QC. Worked with many lawyers over the time. But those are the people who taught me, who gave me opportunity to learn, to train. 5 years after I qualified in 1988, Mr. Adams called me into his office and he says, "Young man, one of these days you are going to be Chief Justice or Chief Minister. I haven't figured out which yet." And I laughed at him. And he says, "No, my son." And he says, "I am shortly to leave here. But I will not leave before you are a partner in this firm." And so said, so done. December 1993, I became a partner in Charles Adams, Ritchie, and Duckworth. That was no big law firm, but it was a solid, mid-sized firm with a very sound reputation for good work. It's now been subsumed by a firm called Collis Krill, and the only surviving member is Anton Duckworth. But, Madam Speaker, I say all of that to say that I do not stand and condemn foreign lawyers who have come here and worked and helped train us as Caymanians and given Caymanians an opportunity. Because I owe what I managed to achieve almost entirely to the training and opportunities that foreign lawyers gave me. And I shall never, ever forget that. But, Madam Speaker, I also know, as does the Minister for Financial Services, because we were in the same year in law school, the second year to graduate from the Cayman Islands Law School, that prejudice and discrimination exist and has always existed. The form it takes may have changed over the course of those years, but not the reality. Because in those early days, we battled against the view that somehow the education we were receiving at the Cayman Islands Law School was substandard, and that we wouldn't or couldn't meet the challenges that the profession presented. But we persevered. He and I and Frank Banks, there were only three of us in that year who actually finished that year. There were others who started. but only 3 of us went through to graduation, because those days it was 5 years at the law school. You did the academic bit contemporaneously with the articles. But all 3 of us became partners. Frank and the Minister for Financial Services at what was then W.S. Walker and Co., and myself at Charles Adams, Rich and Duckworth. I was actually, and I don't think I'm mistaken in this, the second Caymanian to be made a partner in a Cayman law firm. There were other Caymanians who actually formed firms and thereby became partners. I'm not counting those in my analysis, but to go into a firm and to rise through the ranks to become a partner. The only other one that I recall did that was Mrs. Sharon Pearson. She was the first one at Maples and Calder. But Madam Speaker, as I said, the issues about discrimination which have been brought to the fore in this rancorous debate over the course of the last, quite frankly, 15 years are not new. Madam Speaker, I carried the flag on behalf of Caymanian lawyers long before the 5th elected member for Georgetown seriously thought about going into the practice of law. And so they will forgive me if I resent the inference that somehow I don't fight, I don't believe in Caymanians, or that I don't take seriously the charges that have been made by many Caymanian lawyers about their treatment, unfair treatment in law firms. And Madam Speaker, as far as putting your name to it, believe you me, I understand all that. I found, Madam Speaker, a speech I made at the opening of Grand Court in January of 1999. I was president of the Bar Association for 2 terms, 1998 to 1999 and 1999 to 2000. I resigned just prior to my running for the elections. And Madam Speaker, I was chastised quite publicly in some instances in the Caymanian Compass at the time by a prominent Cayman attorney about politicizing the legal profession at the opening of Grand Court. And Madam Speaker, the concern then was what I had said about this issue of discrimination and lack of opportunity for Caymanian lawyers. Madam Speaker, this is January 1999. Madam Speaker, I'm going to read, with your permission, a bit of that speech.
Please proceed.
I was talking about the growth of Cayman and the growth of the legal profession. I said, Madam Speaker, another measure of this growth is the judiciary itself and what is now generally termed government's legal department. When the Cayman Islands legislated into existence its own Court of Appeal in May of 1984, the judiciary consisted of 1 Grand Court judge and 1 magistrate. Government's legal department consisted of the Attorney General, 1 legal draftsman, and 4 Crown Counsel. It now requires 3 full-time Grand Court judges and 1 part-time judge, as well as 3 magistrates sitting full-time to deal with the business of the courts. Government's legal department now consists of the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, 4 legal draftsmen, and 12 Crown Counsel. This is 1999. When I was admitted to practice in 1988, there were approximately 75 lawyers entitled to practice at the Cayman Bar, including those in the employ of the Cayman Islands government. There were only about 60. I think I was 62 or 63 on the register in private practice because government lawyers are not admitted to the bar. That number has more than tripled in the last 11 years, and there are now approximately 250 lawyers entitled to practice at the Cayman Bar. During the course of last year alone, some 24 were admitted. Phenomenal, extraordinary, tremendous, unprecedented. The superlatives roll easily off the tongue when describing the development of Cayman's judicial system and legal profession over the past 20 years or so. It is tempting to offer ourselves congratulations and tempting to say, we are all grown up now, masters of our own destiny. We have our own court of appeal, our own law reports, our own law school. What more is there? We can rightfully be proud of the achievements of the past 2 decades. We must be cognizant, however, that the pace at which we have developed has had a heavy price. The very building in which we are presently assembled bears mute testimony to the strains which the sheer pace of development continues to exert. What was once an elegant and commodious building has been reconfigured, partitioned, and sub-partitioned in an effort to accommodate its burgeoning staff and clientele. The result is less than aesthetic. But the consequences run far deeper than aesthetics. As Cayman's social problems deepen, the inability of the judicial system to cope with the great number of mainly young persons who are routinely convicted of drug-related offenses becomes more and more manifest. For a quarter of a century, Cayman has paid homage to the god of development, blithely and deliberately ignoring the social costs. We are now reaping the results which are coming home to roost with a vengeance. All our systems, including the judicial system, are ill-equipped to deal with the consequences. The courts are hamstrung by a lack of suitable sentencing options and by legislation whose underlying principle is send the offender to prison and the problem will go away. Events over the course of the last few months have demonstrated that Cayman is not even equipped to adequately contain the dozens of persons whom the courts sentence to terms of imprisonment every year, let alone provide meaningful rehabilitation. And Madam Speaker, that was a reference to the riot at the prison earlier that year. Although, then I moved on, Madam Speaker, to the point, the real point of my reading this. What of the legal profession itself? How has it fared in this fantastic growth spurt? What of the Caymanian lawyer? How has he or she done? As I indicated earlier, the number of lawyers has increased threefold in the past decade alone. There is little doubt that the standard of the Cayman Bar has also improved, and certainly the quantity and complexity of the work available in Cayman has increased significantly over the years. The Cayman Islands Law School has produced a number of Caymanian lawyers, most of whom are engaged in the practice of law in Cayman. Notwithstanding this, however, 18 years after the law school's inception, less than a quarter of the lawyers in practice in these islands possess Caymanian status. Sadly, the consensus of young Caymanian lawyers is that it is very difficult to progress in the profession. Many are becoming frustrated at the lack of adequate training and opportunities to do quality work. In a number of firms and institutions, there is the perception that Caymanian lawyers are suffered only as a necessary evil to ensure the grant or renewal of work permits for foreign lawyers. At this point in Cayman's development, this attitude is unacceptable and deeply resented. The Bar Association is committed to furthering the development and advancement of Caymanian lawyers and will continue to make appropriate representations to the relevant authorities when evidence of discrimination is uncovered. On a separate but related point, I should say that the Bar Association has taken the position that entry-level posts within the profession should be reserved for Caymanians or spouses of Caymanians, and that work permits should not be granted to lawyers with less than 3 years' experience. Representations to this effect have been made to the Honorable Attorney General, to the Leader of Government Business, and to the Immigration Board. Madam Speaker, the speech goes on, but those are the key bits that I made in 1999. As I said, I was vilified by many within the legal fraternity, but I could care less. And so, Madam Speaker, you will understand why I feel a particular resentment to suggestions that this man doesn't care about the future of Caymanian attorneys. And even if I was completely selfish, as I said in a previous debate, if they succeed in their current mission to remove me from this hallowed house, hallowed halls, what do you think I could do? Mind you, I grew up with hard work, hot sun, and red mole under my fingernails. Nothing I like better. But I can't survive in this Cayman on that basis. And while I can turn my hands to a number of things, legal practice is what I was taught, what I am able to do, and what I like to do. So, I don't know who thinks that I'm a complete and utter idiot, but I would have to be all of that for me to agree to be part of a process which resulted in making things worse for Caymanian lawyers, because no matter what else they brand me, I is Caymanian to the bone. I am the 7th generation born here on my father's side. My mother's was a Borden. I don't know how far back that go. I don't have no way else to go. And even if I did, I don't want to go nowhere else. I wasn't just born here. I want to die here and hear my bones interred. I don't want to burn me up. I want them to bury me. I want them to bury me in some of that Cayman white sand. Madam Speaker, the member from East End says he doesn't want me burned up. He wants my tomb where he can come and visit me in his old age. But I have promised him long time ago that even if nobody else won't do it, I will read his obituary. I owe him that much, Madam Speaker. I owe him that much.
Member from Easton, I don't know whether that's an invitation, a treat, or a threat.
It's no threat, Madam Speaker. As bad as he is,
wishful thinking on his part, Madam Speaker.
Bad as he is, I don't want to see him dead. No, Madam Speaker, not at all. Madam Speaker, it is good to have a moment of levity in all of this that has gone on. It is, I think, a clear indication of the fact that after all of the rancor that members understand how serious our charge is and what we have to do, and that when all is said and done, in this house and outside it, we are all Caymanians in here. This is the one place that all Caymanians are. There's nobody who not born of this soil and of its people in here. And if collectively the 18 of us can't do right by Caymanians, then they ought to vote each and every one of us out and tar and feather our backsides. Madam Speaker, the position that I have struggled to understand, and I'm not trying to create no friction because I am hopeful, optimistic, prayerful even, that tomorrow we can get to a place where every member in this House can support a bill in the best interest of Cayman, the legal profession, the financial services industry, and Caymanians. But what I have not been able to get my head around, Madam Speaker, is how it seems some in this House, but a lot outside, seem to believe that continuing with the status quo, that is, not passing a new legal practitioner's law, is somehow preferable to measures, whether they believe they don't go far enough or not, which are aimed at improving the regulation of the profession, ensuring that everyone who practices or purports to practice Cayman law is admitted to the Cayman bar and susceptible to the jurisdiction of the Grand Court, and therefore subject to discipline. Encourages the employment, education, training, and upward mobility advancement of Caymanians in the law. Because that's what the objective of the bill is. I acknowledge, I accept the criticisms that in a number of respects, the draft that has been circulated and subject to debate falls short of where we need to be. But Madam Speaker, the government has accepted that we need to make changes, hence the significant number of proposed amendments on this side. In the years that I have been here, many, if not the majority of major bills that come here get subjected to significant committee stage amendments. That's part of the process. That's the reason why there's a committee stage process. If it was simply that what the government brings, the opposition, the members of the House could say aye or nay, there would be no need for a committee stage process. We could leave the AG to fix whatever little typographical issues there were. A committee stage, every member has the opportunity to debate the clauses, and not just once, but more than once, unlike debate in the full House. So it is a back and fro process. I grant them, I've never known any bill to have as many proposed amendments as this one. I concede that. But to suggest that because the government is proposing amendments to the bill, that is somehow some concession that the bill is fatally flawed or terrible, I think is a bit of a stretch. What we're proposing is something that happens in every single instance where a bill is committed to committee. And I do believe, Madam Speaker, that once, and I do again acknowledge that the government's circulation of the committee stage amendments is late, and that members on the other side are right to to complain that they haven't had longer opportunity to consider these. Accept that. But I'm hopeful that tomorrow we will get to a place where we can narrow down the number of amendments that have to be considered by the committee, and that we can wind up in a place where we agree, at least on the big issues that concern us all. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, discrimination is alive and well. I've said before, and I don't like to use personal circumstances, but I felt forced to in these instances because it seems like somehow I was being demonized or vilified, that I don't really understand all of these things that are affecting local people. My wife, who I must say did far better at law school than I did. Madam Speaker, the system is far more transparent now, the examination system, than it was in those days when I went to law school. We didn't know what mark we got. We just knew if we got in the end, whether you got what was called a lower second or a upper second or first or third, whatever you got, but you didn't know precisely what your mark is. These days, at least at the University of Liverpool, they send you what your precise mark, and the university that my son went to, the same thing. They send you what the exact mark was in each of your subjects. And she fell just 2 percentage points short of a first-class pass on average. 2 years she could not get articles. And it can't be because of her looks, because she's not bad looking. I could only say it had something to do with her age, or perhaps the fact that she happened to be married to the leader of the opposition. But for whatever reason, I was leader of the opposition at the time. The current leader of the opposition is our first cousin. But, Madam Speaker, we never have known why she wasn't considered for articles. She got articles subsequently at Hampson and Company, and she's there as a qualified lawyer in a very satisfying practice, and she's happy. She isn't inclined to go to any big law firm and make millions. I wish she was. Then I might be able to worry less about my future. But my son is finishing his articles at Maples and, by all indications, doing well. I am grateful they have given him the opportunity. I hope he does well enough and they hire him. But all of that, Madam Speaker, in the end, we know, and they know, that Caymanian attorneys generally have not been given a fair ride and opportunity in many, I'm not going to say all, in many of the law firms in Cayman. I say this, and I've said it in the presence of some of the senior partners of some of those firms who I am quite friendly with. I said, I'm afraid no matter how much you protest, I cannot believe that in almost 20 years, there aren't more Caymanians who have been made partners in these firms. The statistics are against your claim that it's a meritocracy. because I do not for one moment believe that every Caymanian who gets a law degree is entitled to become a partner in a law firm. I was a partner in a law firm, although not one of those big ones, and I understand a bit about what is required and what it takes. And the legal profession is no different in that sense than any other vocation. Not everybody is going to rise to the top. Life is not like that. But there must be compelling reasons why a competent, hard-working, committed Caymanian lawyer can only get so high. And if the law firms and the legal fraternity generally has not gotten the message after all that has gone on over the course of the last couple of years, then I don't know what else it is going to take. But I am afraid, Madam Speaker, that where we are now, there is little room for acceptance of mere promises about what is going to be done. Firms are going to have to be firmly encouraged by legislative measures to do the right thing by our people. Madam Speaker, I don't come to that view easily. I am by nature a conservative, and I am most reluctant to interfere with how businesses operate and to come to any sort of decision which forces businesses, because the law firms are quite frankly in this day and age, they are businesses, to make business decisions because the legislation requires them to do so. But all of us in here and many out there, many who do not have my life experience simply because they are younger, many of them will not accept correctly, and correctly so, will not accept that simply being chastised by this assembly is going to have a sufficient and lasting effect on the way law firms conduct their affairs with respect to training opportunities and opportunities for upward advancement within the firms. It is sad that it has come to this, but as the second elected member from Georgetown said, the law firms, or many of the law firms, because I know there are some who do the right thing, and unfortunately everybody gets wrapped up in it. I want to make sure that I know, because I know of instances, there are law firms and there are partners who really have the vested interest of Caymanians at heart and really try to give them opportunities. But as the second elected member from Georgetown said yesterday in his debate, they are to blame for where we are today. And the perception broadly about the lack of opportunities available to Caymanian attorneys and aspiring attorneys. If we look at the accounting profession, Madam Speaker, the converse is true. The perception broadly is that the accounting profession in Cayman has opened its doors to Caymanians, have given them opportunities to climb the ladder. We have a significant number of instances of Caymanians who have become managing partners. In the case of Dan Scott, I think he's regional managing partner of Ernst & Young. In these halls alone, We have the second elected member for Georgetown, who's a former managing partner of KPMG. And the Minister of Financial Services, as far as the law firms are concerned, rose to be global managing partner of Walker's. So it is possible, Madam Speaker. It is not that there is some congenital defect in Caymanians which limit their ability to reach a certain point within the legal profession. You can only go so far, and then that gene limits your ability to perform beyond that. And so, Madam Speaker, as concerned as I am about affirmative action type provisions, I am at my absolute wit's end as to what we can do short of that. Because if the history of this tortuous issue is any indication of its future, I can't really look forward with any optimism that without that there is going to be any significant cultural change in the way these issues are addressed. And so, Madam Speaker, I am driven. It takes me a while to get there sometimes. I am driven to the inevitable because I'm by nature conservative. And I don't believe that we should burn down the house because we are dissatisfied with how with the living conditions. Because then we're going to be homeless too. And like I said before, those who are not of this place got another home to go to. But this legal profession and the financial services industry more broadly employs thousands and thousands of people, of our own people. And so we have to strive to strike the right balance so that we don't wind up with law firms in Cayman feeling that they can't operate efficiently and effectively within the constraints of the legislation that is here. We don't want flight of business from the country. And so that is a very serious charge that we have as members of this House over the course of the next day or two, to try to get to that point where we get that balance as right as possible. We all know it's a struggle. It's been 15 years, and I don't know how many iterations of the bill, but I know there were 3 administrations that have tried to get a new legal practitioners bill through. My hope, my prayer, Madam Speaker, is that this House, 2013 to 2017, that we are the ones who succeed in giving this country, giving our people what we really desperately need to regulate a law to regulate the legal profession effectively. A modern piece of legislation which supports and promotes the wide range of legal services that Cayman legal practitioners provide, that provides for the adequate regulation of the overseas practice of Cayman law, and which promotes, supports, encourages the education, training, employment, and upward advancement of Caymanian attorneys. That, Madam Speaker, is what my aspiration is, and what I believe should be the objective of every honorable member of this House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak or recognize the third elected member from Westby?
Ask your premier what I told him, sir. Sit down and just hold your space. And Madam Speaker, is one thing I've learned is that when the premier or the leader of the opposition say they're going to make a short one, short is relative when you get to their amount of years in this place. But Madam Speaker, at the beginning of this debate, I was not sure if I was going to speak or not because the leader of the opposition covered it pretty much. But then something happened, and I happened to have told the deputy governor about it. I had 7 young clerks call me and ask if there was parking around the back of my house, and they parked. They came in 2 cars, and they told me some of the trials and tribulations, Madam Speaker. And there's something that stood out. They said there was a young man who refused to sign, like they were all almost kind of forced to. So this young man, later on, was given his articles, but for some reason, not given a job. And the company, all of a sudden, the company hired 3 from overseas, but yet he wanted to stay there and work, didn't want to leave, did time overseas, proven himself, got called to the bar, but they would not give him a job. They felt it was because he refused to sign the papers that was sent to the different societies saying that they agreed with this first bill that was brought to this place. Madam Speaker, when you get the amount of texts and WhatsApp and emails and people dropping off letters to you because they don't want their emails to be trailed, telling you this is what's happening. What just happened in that back room just now, where we all decided what we're going to do with this, I think is a wonderful thing for this country and for this legal fraternity going forward. But it would be remiss of me, Madam Speaker, not to mention a few people. I don't know, and I can't remember, Madam Speaker, where I first heard it, but the saying, courage is contagious. It is true. And yes, Mr. Premier, fear is also contagious, yes. And maybe it was fear that got us now that we are going to do the right thing. But Madam Speaker, I'm going to call off 3 names first. And I do know the Ministress of Education, she doesn't like that, but I'll do it on purpose every time, would like to know that it was 3 women that you have to give kudos to. Selena Tibbetts, Anna Gubo, Sharon Rolston, who put names and experiences to paper, knowing what this would do to them. The 5th elected member from Georgetown, you've heard people say it. He's thrown whatever he had in the legal field away, sacrificed a lot to make sure to fight that we are to the position where we are now. And Madam Speaker, I'm going to table 4 letters with your permission. And I would like to read one paragraph from one. And this was sent, Madam Speaker, to all elected members of the Legislative Assembly. Sharon Rolston, Attorney at Law, March 4th, 2017. And I have
so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The other 3 are from Selena Tibbetts, Wilton MacDonald, and one that is anonymous. I want to read one paragraph from the one. Here's a Sharon Ralston one. Thank you. I know that no one can say with any sense of fairness that I am not trainable. And Madam Speaker, why I chose to use this one. This young lady and her family would come West Bay every Friday. Their family invited, this is in the 70s, Madam Speaker. Her father was the chief meteorologist. Her, Sharon, Shirley, and Frank would arrive at West Bay from CCC every Friday evening. And they would stay there until Sunday evening when they'd go back to their house in town. They had a house on Boggy Sand Road. These people mixed with everyone regardless of color, regardless of their status in society, because some of the people, the Mr. and Mrs. Ralston, were allowed to come over to their house on Saturdays for hot dogs or hamburgers. Some of us in West Bay didn't want them to come to our yard, Madam Speaker. So when someone like herself has worked her way to the top, has an excellent reputation, attitude, works across the board, doesn't matter where anyone is from, and you see a letter like this must be read, and I'm glad it will be here for posterity. I start, Madam Speaker, quote, I know that no one can say with any sense of fairness that I am not trainable, that I cannot achieve, and yet I was denied training and promotion by my employer. I witnessed many other Caymanians being held down professionally, including the 2 previously referred to above, to say with complete confidence that this was due to the fact that our only real failings were that we were Caymanians. Some partners even went so far as to expressly say so, and I was in fact verbally assaulted by a senior equity partner as being a effing ignorant Caymanian. I didn't.
Honourable member, I'm going to ask the Hansard to take that out as not parliamentary. So if you come to it again,
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
just say blank.
Blank, ignorant Caymanian. Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate your guidance. Bleep, bleep. Madam Speaker, it goes on to say, do you need any more proof than that? I have too many unfortunate and hurtful experiences of being denied opportunities to advance to recount here, but that does not negate the fact that the discrimination against me was very real. We have all seen foreign qualified attorneys with far less aptitude and ability than ourselves achieve simply due to their nationality and clout with those of their ilk. And again, we have heard it said from some of their fellow partners, this was in fact the only reason they made it to equity. Madam Speaker, the people standing up and representing these people that have been downtrodden, held back, I do hope those young lawyers that are coming behind will remember these 18 people in here that have worked to try to make sure, or at least, I will say 16 or 17 of us for sure, have worked real hard to get this bill in place. Madam Speaker, there was a lot of times the talk was going back and forth, and you heard about the accountants. There was no need, Madam Speaker, to even bring in the accountants in this, because it was not comparable. They did their job in 2004, I think, and what was brought here last year was just something keeping them up to date. To me, this was a complete different thing. And Madam Speaker, in that back room just now, I felt really proud to see what we sat down, cooler heads prevailed, and everyone came to let us try to get through what we agree on, and then we'll hash out those that we're going to fight on. There are some things, Madam Speaker, that the young lawyers have said over and over, almost everyone you spoke to. This thing about a loving people here with 3 years PQE is, I hope that does not become a sticking point, because talking to even people who have been in the law firms now for 8, 9, 10 years say it's a joke. I called a friend of mine because when I first heard the word Bahamas, I told the Deputy Premier, Madam Speaker, that he had taken something out of my 2-hour speech when he said what he said about the Bahamas. And it was exactly what the Bahamian lawyer had told myself. He said, Madam Speaker, he said, yes, the pie over here is really small. But he says, we own the pie. That's a big difference. It's a matter of pride. And I said to him, Madam Speaker, that pride can't feed you. And Madam Speaker, he says, well, we can still now try to build the pie. Whether the horse is done through the gate, they don't know. But Madam Speaker, we have to find a middle ground. And I do think we will do that. The fact that we have 3 or 4 lawyers who felt the sting of this themselves, Madam Speaker, we should know where we have to go. The fact that we have experience in this place, in this house, Madam Speaker, to know that we are not to trouble the industry, but we need the industry to work with us, Madam Speaker. It's very simple. Madam Speaker, there's been some people who have stood out in this fight. Samuel Jackson, Teresa Pickturn, Sherry Borden, Anthony Akawani, Juan Carter, Richard Barton, Ori Marion Jr., and there are quite a few other people that if we mention them, they'll probably be in trouble tomorrow in their law firms. So we can't do that. But Madam Speaker, I would like to say that I do hope tomorrow will be smooth sailing. I know we'll have our little bumps here and there, but we do hope that next time we sit down here, we'll have this bill committed and that the country will see that this thing was not perceived, Madam Speaker. This was a fact of what's going on out there, and that it is time for it to stop. Madam Speaker, thank you very much, and I do pray that we will get this finished quickly.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable 4th elected member from Westby.
Small job. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too rise to make a short contribution to the Legal Practitioners Bill 2016 before us. Madam Speaker, I have been a member of this Honorable House for the last 16 years and 4 months. And I can't recall any bill that has been so controversial with so many Caymanians who would be or are being affected by this bill, who have come forward and signed their names to letters, who have gotten sick and tired of the discrimination and unfair treatment in the industry, who have just taken a stand regardless of the cost because they don't want other Caymanians to experience, to have the same experiences that they're having. Madam Speaker, I intended to, even though I'm not much of a long speaker, I intended to do quite a lengthy debate on this one, but after we are all met in the committee room, we have come to some agreements that we would try to cut our debate short. But, Madam Speaker, with your indulgence, I too have 4 letters that I would like to table. But before I do, there's one with many of the signatures of the young or the Caymanian attorneys at law that I would like to read.
So ordered.
Madam Speaker, this was March 10, 2017. Members of the Legislative Assembly, the Legal Practitioners Bill 2016. We, the undersigned, are writing to you as Caymanians and attorneys at law. We wish to express our concerns about the state of affairs that exist in the legal profession today and wish to add our collective voices to those who have already spoken out and whose letters were read out in the Assembly yesterday. We have heard of the extraordinary letters which have been written already. We, as you must surely do, understand the courage of those individuals who have expressed themselves publicly. We understand the risk of doing so, risk borne by the legal industry that is no longer, nor has been for decades, in Caymanian control. Should this letter be attacked, discredited, or ignored, it would only bear further witness that this bill and those advancing it are not interested in what Caymanians have to say. The cloak of their excuse in trying to protect the financial service industry will be transparent. We appeal to you as Caymanians, as legislators, some as attorneys yourselves, who may have once been in our position, to pay greater heed to the outcry that is gathering against the bill in its current form. We appeal to you to believe in the ability of the Caymanian attorneys at law, who simply want a fair, equitable chance at proper training, suitable exposure to the marketing and business development opportunities, and career advancement with the field of law, to rightfully afford the fair opportunity to realize their potential to become future equity holders in the law firms today and tomorrow. This, after all, is about our collective future. We implore you to do the right thing. Forget politics and remember that you are elected leaders who promise to stand for the people, and the people are now speaking and asking for your leadership and support. Yours sincerely, Sharon Ralston, Raquel Smith, Ian Paget Brown, QC, Vaughn Carter, Johan Moxham, Anthony Aquinimi, Sammy Jackson, Selena Tibbetts, Sheena Westerborg, Swen Cornelson, Delroy Murray, Desiree Jacob, Sherry Borden Cowan, Chandra Glidden, Denise Archer. Madam Speakers, these are Caymanians who have come forward, who are risking everything in their legal career, so to speak, but who have had enough. We, as legislators in this assembly, have to give them as much protection and give them as much assistance as we can. Madam Speaker, I, for one, will give them as much encouragement and assistance as I possibly can. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize Honorable Attorney General.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just about everything that can and should be said about this issue have been said, and I'm sure will continue to be voiced after we're all finished here. And I think we all agree that it has been a very difficult debate, but it is also a very necessary debate, Madam Speaker. Speaking for myself, Madam Speaker, I can say that the Honorable Chief Justice and myself have, over the years and on several occasions, attempted to be honest brokers, and our efforts in this regard have been well documented. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, sometimes our efforts have been misunderstood, but such is life. Nevertheless, we need to soldier on. Madam Speaker, it is obvious from what has been said thus far that this is a very passionate issue. And there are strong but honest views held by all sides. Indeed, some will agree, Madam Speaker, that the issue of the legal practitioner's law over the years has been characterized by misunderstandings, mistrust, persons' attitudes towards each other, and perhaps a bit of cultural issues as well. There are other factors. But, Madam Speaker, it would be wrong to dismiss the concerns, the positions expressed or taken by any of the parties in this debate. What is required, and thankfully, what is emerging from the discussions we've been hearing, is that there's some type of accommodation, Madam Speaker, that can be made in respect of all parties to this issue. And I'm confident that we will achieve a middle ground that properly reflects the need for a modern, well-regulated legal profession and the delivery of quality legal services, but with a well-documented safeguards, Madam Speaker, to guarantee our young, aspiring Caymanian attorneys the opportunity for a rewarding career in the profession, indeed a fair shake, a level playing field to enter and progress within the profession. After all, Madam Speaker, I think part of the problem that we're having is that it is being referred to as an industry. It is not an industry, it's a profession. It's a legal profession. And because it's a profession, there are certain rules, there are certain ethics, there are certain canons that determine how we relate to each other as colleagues. Canons, rules, ethics that you will not necessarily find in an industry. Madam Speaker, much has been said about whether offenses may have been committed by persons practicing Cayman Islands law overseas. And I do not intend to delve too much into this issue myself, given that I am not aware of any investigation or inquiry that has taken place in this regard. I wish, however, Madam Speaker, to clarify, certainly in my view, certain issues. Madam Speaker, in the Legal Practitioners Law 2015 revision, there are no specific provisions that speak to regulating the practice of law firms situated overseas. Section 10 of the current law does not do so. In addition, Madam Speaker, the practice of Cayman Islands law overseas is not in and of itself an offense. Certainly, not according to Section 10 of the current law. And in that respect, Madam Speaker, I would like honorable members, rather, to compare Clause 49 of the current bill. Clause 49 of the current bill, Madam Speaker, the bill before the House, the current bill, speaks to 49.1. It says, an attorney at law shall not practice Cayman Islands law, whether in the island or in another jurisdiction. Madam Speaker, those language, or in another jurisdiction, does not appear in Section 10 of the current law. Madam Speaker, if you also look at Clause 50 of the current bill, Clause 50, subsection 1, speaks to practicing certificate may be obtained in the case of an attorney who intends to practice Cayman Islands law in another jurisdiction. That's 51B, speaks expressly to another jurisdiction. Madam Speaker, 50, subsection 3, speaks to the application form approved by the clerk of the court shall require an attorney to A, state whether the attorney intends to practice Cayman Islands law in the island or in another jurisdiction. And finally, Madam Speaker, Section 50, subsection 4, makes it quite clear. It says, Clause 54, an attorney or a law firm shall not knowingly or recklessly include in an application form a false or misleading particular, and an attorney or a law firm that acts in contravention of this subsection commits an offense and is liable in summary conviction to a fine of $15,000. So, if in applying for a practicing certificate to practice in the Cayman Islands or in another jurisdiction, and false information is supplied, it is a criminal offense, punishable according to the clause in the bill. Madam Speaker, the current Section 10 has no such provision. Indeed, a close look at Section 10 of the bill shows that its provision speaks to specific limitations on certain prohibited conducts. Section 10 says, Madam Speaker, a person who not been admitted to practice, doesn't say in another jurisdiction, person who not been admitted to practice and enrolled as an attorney or otherwise lawfully authorized shall not, there's a typo there, but not should be in there, shall not directly or indirectly for fee or gain or reward draw up or prepare any instrument relating to movable or immovable property or any proceedings. And it goes on to say, Madam Speaker, if you do so without being admitted within the Cayman Islands, you commit an offense and is liable to a fine of $200 if you're convicted in the summer court. Madam Speaker, one of the things that is quite noticeable about Section 10 is that, for some reason, it doesn't speak about the provision of legal advice. It's quite silent on the provision of legal advice. It speaks about drawing up documents, property or removal of property. Not a word about the provision of legal advice. So Section 10 is not extraterritorial. The new bill seeks to address the extraterritorial aspect of practicing Cayman Islands law. As it is now, the practice of Cayman Islands law abroad is not an offense. In my view, that is. So, Madam Speaker, the question is, how, if any offense were committed, put aside the issue of whether there's evidence to that effect, we would be able to deal with this, because any offense would have been committed in another jurisdiction. So there's a question of jurisdiction, how we would prosecute these matters, given that the bill itself is not extraterritorial. And so, Madam Speaker, the truth is, and I know honorable members and those who speak to this issue are quite passionate about it, but there is a lacuna in the current law as it relates to regulating the practice of law in another jurisdiction. The current bill before the House seeks to address that issue, Madam Speaker, as I pointed out in sections 49, clauses 49 and 50. Madam Speaker, there was the issue of conspiracy, and although the honorable member from North Side didn't delve into that, I will, in his debate, I will just say that as a matter of law, it follows that if you can't prove what we call a predicate offense, that a predicate offense was committed in the practices of law abroad, then you can't prove a conspiracy either, legally. Because you can only conspire to do an unlawful purpose. And there's no unlawful purpose, in my view. But, Madam Speaker, I am not the final arbiter of whether criminal offenses are committed or not. I'm just giving you my opinion on the issue. But I think that any attorney would be challenged to find that Section 10 in any way regulate and, worse yet, provides an offense for the practice of Cayman Islands law abroad. Madam Speaker, I merely wish to offer those observations as it relates to whether or not there is any contravention of Section 10 as it speaks to that issue. Madam Speaker, the sort of also comment is that I'm speaking to the motion. I am quite explicit in what I said. The honorable member from North Side spoke about Section 10 being committed and filed and complaints being made to the DPP's office, and the DPP responded, and he responded in return, and he has not heard quehe since then. I'm quoting it, those are his words. That's right. So that's what I'm debating. I'm not debating, you notice I'm not delving into the issue of conspiracy, because in fairness to the member from North Side, he did not delve into the issue of whether or not a conspiracy has been committed. That is part of the motion, and I'm not discussing or debating the motion. So I'm just trying to clarify whether or not, in my view, any offense has been committed in that respect. So, Madam Speaker, it is fair to say that the debate over the last 15 years has been very passionate. It's been fierce on both sides. And I think, in large part, as I said, there's consensus that the practice of law has become a global phenomenon. It's a business, Madam Speaker, that has transcends anyone's jurisdiction. It's multi-jurisdictional. And it means, therefore, that it has to be accepted that the provision of services of Cayman Islands law is integral to the continuing prosperity of these jurisdictions. And the only question should therefore be, how do we regulate? How do we regulate this phenomenon? How do we manage it in a way that it is beneficial to all? Madam Speaker, there are overseas clients that need to be serviced. I think we all agree that the majority of the work handled by some of these larger firms are not work that originate in Cayman. So we need to find a way, and I'm happy to hear that there's some consensus emerging. We need to find a way, I think someone used the word, to strike the right balance in terms of what needs to be done, Mr. Speaker. It should be, and it must be, that the young Caymanians who wish to develop professionally should be afforded the opportunity and support, Madam Speaker, to benefit from the practice of law in the Cayman Islands. And those who are older members and those who have controlling interest should find a way to facilitate, Madam Speaker, and encourage these young aspiring colleagues to realize their aspirations. And they must do so, in my view, in a meaningful way, not by platitudes or generalized commitments, but in a tangible way. Give them the opportunity, give them the encouragement, give them the support, Madam Speaker, give them the comfort to do so. I am confident, Madam Speaker, that if they get the opportunity, they will grasp it with both hands. The bill, Madam Speaker, is not perfect, but it's a good start. And it is what it is. Once it is passed into law, every effort should be made to keep it under constant review to ensure, Madam Speaker, that whatever has been promised, whatever was intended, is being delivered. This is the commitment that needs to be given as well. The law will be kept under constant review to ensure that there's a delivery of the commitments and the promises, Mr. Speaker. The concerns that have been expressed are genuine. These are not busybodies who have been making the effort to write and express concerns and has gone as far as putting their names to these letters. So, Madam Speaker, we also need to recognize, though, that it has not always been doom and gloom. It is true that the law associations, Madam Speaker, the Bar Association, the Law Society, sometimes in conjunction with the law school, the Legal Advisory Council, the Judicial Department, have always, over the years, been engaged in numerous initiatives, Madam Speaker, towards the continuing professional development of young and aspiring attorneys, and they should be commended. Madam Speaker, initiatives such as more placement for article clerks. There's a judicial clerkship program, Madam Speaker, that has just been rolled out. There's a Chancery Bar trainee placement scheme as part of articles, as well as other initiatives for which, Madam Speaker, I'm sure you're all grateful. Fact is, of course, we all agree also that more needs to be done. And more needs to be done in order to level the playing field, Madam Speaker, and to conquer the mistrust that has dogged our profession for so long. But, Madam Speaker, I'm hopeful. I think it is the Chinese who says that a journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with the first step. And if this is the first step, we should count it as such and continue to build on it and to soldier on, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the only other thing I need to say is that I am understandably interested in the provision in the bill which seeks to ensure that as a profession they will be compliant with the 40 FATF recommendations, and more so, Madam Speaker, when we mean the Cayman Islands, the jurisdiction is up for review later this year. Madam Speaker, I think I'm looking forward, certainly. I think Clause 21 of the bill speaks to or contemplate the drafting of rules that would capture the requirements to ensure compliance with the FATF recommendations. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel in this regard. I've looked at, for example, the position in Singapore, and they have developed a very comprehensive set of rules, FATF compliance rules, money laundering, anti-money laundering rules. And I think we would be well encouraged to try and look at those and to customize it to reflect the Cayman Islands position. And I certainly look forward, along with the anti-money laundering steering group and the unit, look forward to working with the profession in promulgating those rules to ensure, Madam Speaker, that when the jurisdiction is reviewed later this year, we are certainly in compliance. So, Madam Speaker, to end, I would say that what is required is good sense, someone referred to it as cool head, consensus, compromise. And I am heartened by the discussions that have taken place so far, that there is an acceptance that this is the way to deal with this matter. But, Madam Speaker, it is true that the practice of law in the Cayman Islands need to be regulated with a modern sort of framework that would set us on the right path and reflect the appropriate balance. And I'm confident, Madam Speaker, that we will be able to achieve that going forward, starting, Madam Speaker, starting with the current bill before the House. I thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize Honourable Minister responsible for sports.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's too late to go home early. Do I have 2 hours? Just kidding. I wouldn't do that. But, Madam Speaker, this has been quite an experience, to say the least. Madam Speaker, this is an attempt to revise a 48-year-old piece of legislation. And the title of this bill, I think, sums up and is the only thing that we haven't disagreed upon. A bill for a law to repeal and replace the Legal Practitioners Law 2015 revision to regulate the practice of Cayman Islands law, both in the islands and elsewhere, to establish a Cayman Islands Legal Practitioners Association, to provide for a system of legal education, to facilitate the entry of Caymanians into the legal profession, to provide for a mechanism to deal with professional misconduct and for incidental and connected purposes. Madam Speaker, that long title pretty much sums up what we have been trying to do. And yes, we may have come at it from different angles, and We have heard a lot, and there's been a lot of emotion, and this is a particularly emotive topic because it concerns our people and it concerns our leading industry or profession. Madam Speaker, one thing I've learned, I can tell you this, is that you got too many lawyers, you can't get no agreement. Yeah, the Premier said the only reasonable one I know is him. He's defended me on a number of occasions in the court across the road, so I will have to accept that. But it was for speed and nothing bad. Anyway, Madam Speaker, a bit of levity as I make my position clear on this. Madam Speaker, I want you to give me permission to refer to a little cartoon that came out that I was looking at last night. And it basically, excuse me, Madam Speaker. All right. No. What's that? No. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that, member from East End. All is well. Madam Speaker, it's so ironic. Just before I refer to this cartoon, in that the Cayman Compass, no longer Caymanian Compass, the Cayman Compass, the editorial for tomorrow is actually accusing us of going too far in protecting Caymanians. I've been gifted a copy of it here. And if you don't mind, Madam Speaker, I will read this. When you have the votes, vote. When you don't have the votes, talk. That's a political axiom which applies neatly to the situation facing Cayman Islands legislators in relation to the Legal Practitioners Bill. On paper, at least, the Progressives government should have the votes, i.e. the majority needed to pass a piece of legislation for every bill that's brought to the floor of the House, particularly on something as important as a new regulatory framework for Cayman's legal sector. At this point, however, it's not clear whether the government is unified on this matter or not. Somehow the Progressives have allowed themselves to be backed into a corner with 200-odd amendments to consider during a highly compressed time frame before the final version of the bill is to be voted on once and for all. We understand the need for and we support some key parts of the bill, but we also have serious reservations about the bill, specifically the protectionist provisions for Caymanian attorneys. While the major law firms seem to have accepted those actions in exchange for the parts of the bill concerning local standards for the profession and the regulation of the practice of Cayman law overseas, we are extremely skeptical and critical of affirmative action measures in an industry and are wary of such provisions if they are included in the final legal practitioner's law, creeping into other business sectors sooner or later. We'll stop there with our opinions on the bill for the simple reason that the document legislators will vote on for its second reading is likely not going to resemble the bill that emerges from the committee stage, remember the 200 amendments, and is eventually put up for the all-important third and final vote. In fact, similar to the rush passage of the 2013 National Conservation Law, which also underwent dramatic renovations on the committee stage before the third readings, we suspect nobody, not even lawmakers, will know for sure what they're voting on until long after they take the vote. In the case of the National Conservation Law, the final version of the legislation was not made available to the public and until nearly 2 months after the Legislative Assembly approved it and weeks after the governor signed it. The Progressives' mismanagement of the legislative process is rather remarkable, considering this particular draft of the Legal Practitioners Bill has been discussed for months and the concept of the bill has been simmering for many years. It's a lot longer than I thought it was. Madam Speaker, I think I can. Okay, I'll continue reading it. During Monday's debate, a rare amount of clarity on the topic was thankfully provided by Minister Tara Rivers, who devoted a large amount of her time to reading an insightful and compelling letter from a Caymanian who works in the legal industry. The writer and employee at Maples Law Firm said the legislative debate thus far had been one-sided and that lawmakers seem not to acknowledge that the vast majority of the jobs generated by Cayman's legal sector aren't for attorneys, but for legal support staff. The writer said she's not a lawyer herself, but has a great job in legal support for a good employer in Maples. For perspective, the writer said Maples has about 100 attorneys and 400 support staff, 300 of whom are Caymanian. Lawmakers who attempt to portray the law firms as big, bad actors risk having those firms move business and support jobs now occupied by Caymanians away from Cayman. The letter writer asks, who's speaking for people like her? Well, Minister Rivers assumed that role, and to great effect. We consider her performance Monday to be a shining moment of her 4 years in office. During debate on this and future bills, Minister Rivers' colleagues would do well to follow her example and use their precious time in the Legislative Assembly to offer valuable perspective to provide cogent arguments and above all to legislate in the best interests of their constituents and for all who live and work in these islands. Madam Speaker, that in that short time reading that has mixed messages because they started off by saying that
the chair is anxiously, let me rephrase that, after having exercised the discretion to have you read it in electronic form, the chair anxiously awaits your defense of members in this chamber to what you just read.
Madam Speaker, it started off by accusing us of protectionist policies, and in the end, it was congratulating Minister Rivers for doing just that. So I am a bit confused, to be quite honest, but that's the compass, and they have their agenda as usual. But I know that we are put here by Caymanians to defend Cayman and Caymanians, and therefore, every one of us, regardless of how we go about our daily job and regardless how we get what we get up here and we say, at the end of the day, I know the heart of everyone is here. In here is for Cayman and what we are trying to do. So, Madam Speaker, this bill is a good example, as I said, of us working together and showing that we have the interests of Cayman and Caymanians at heart. Coming back to the little cartoon quickly, Madam Speaker, it has a picture, and some of you may have seen this before, of a donkey and 4 people in the picture. And the first picture depicts the donkey walking and the couple who owns the donkey walking alongside it. And people observing, 2 other people observing, saying, what a clueless couple. They don't even know how to ride a donkey, ha ha ha. The second picture depicts them riding the donkey with the man in front of the woman. What a wicked couple. They have no mercy to that animal. The third picture, the woman is riding and the man is walking alongside. A stupid man. He should ride because he's the boss of the woman. The fourth picture, the man is riding and the woman is walking. What a selfish man. He should be kind to his wife. And finally, the fifth picture, they're both carrying a donkey. Ha ha ha, what a stupid looking couple carrying a donkey. Madam Speaker, the moral of the story, you cannot please everybody. Whatever you do, there will be people who will criticize you. And last but not least, so just do what you believe is right and don't be distracted by criticisms. So that is my answer to the compass. We are doing what we believe is right, and we do that at all times in the hallowed halls of this legislative assembly. Madam Speaker, there's been a lot of work to get this bill to this point, and I want to congratulate the minister in charge. He's certainly taken his share of blows, and then some. And Madam Speaker, I know this man and I know his heart. I've worked alongside of him now for the last 3.5 years, And I can tell you, there's not many that help to the extent that he helps his people. I know what he did when he was in the law firm and he rose to the top by the sweat of his brow, and how he looked after Caymanians. And he, as we've heard before here, but it can't be repeated enough, the amount of people that he helped education-wise, promotion-wise, and the like, hiring, the whole works. So, Madam Speaker, it did hurt me as well, as the Premier spoke to it in depth, to feel that he's being singled out and criticized, as it were, through some of the bitter moments that we had here over the last few days. But, Madam Speaker, he's a resilient man, and he has taken it like a champion. And I know that at the end of the day, he will have his shining moment for pressing on with not just this piece of legislation. He's had the, I guess he drew the short straw when it came to difficult legislation in this hallowed Parliament since we've been here, because he has brought some controversial issues to the fore. He's had to deal with the NCL, which was not easy, and he, again, stuck with it. So there's no doubt about his stick-activity, but his well-meaning towards Cayman and its people. I know, Madam Speaker, as I said, because I work alongside him, and we do a lot together. So, Madam Speaker, I support this bill. I know that my own experience, and this went back to my early days in the accounting firms, and as a young man in the 1980s, Madam Speaker, I was, as it were, headhunted to join a firm, because I had a friend who was working with a firm, and the partner said to him, so-and-so's, well, he said to the partner, so-and-so's interested in accounts. I was working for government treasurer at the time, and I got a call saying, come and have an interview. I went, and that was the start of my career with accounting firms for some. Went on to be some 15 years or so before I rejoined government. And, Madam Speaker, during that time, I was given all the support, all of the exposure. It's just that the reason I didn't stay and become a partner, because the gates were wide open then for young Caymanians doing well in accounting, was simply because I'd had enough auditing, and it still is. And I mean, I'm going back to the time now of firms that young people don't even know about. We're talking about Ernst & Winnie and Arthur Young. People hear about Ernst & Young. Well, that's how it came about. Those two firms merged. And exactly, we you know, KPMG was known those days as Pete Marwick Mitchell, and the firm that my second elected member colleague from Georgetown rose to the top end. And because of people like him, the Noel Bodens, the Dan Scotts, many of the foreigners who came here as well, who integrated, whether you like them or not, but the Chris Johnsons, the Benbows, and the Jenkinsons, and the Andertons, and the many, Richard Harris, and all the other ones, people that I work for as well, all of these folks came here, integrated in Cayman, and saw the benefit of including and bringing Caymanians along. And that is why many in the accounting profession have excelled. And then you got the Rohan Smalls and all the other ones coming along. So, Madam Speaker, what I'm saying is that Caymanians, given the opportunity, can get the job done. I never saw, in my days in the accounting profession, I never saw an accountant come here and join us that came with no ton of experience. The experience was garnered right here alongside people like myself. And they went on to develop into partners. The same applies to the law firms. And this is where I'm a little perplexed as to why we have so many people in the legal profession who are being held down when they could, in fact, if given the opportunity, rise to the top. The reason why I decided to speak, to be quite honest, was on Friday. It was I went up to Shetty, the hospital, and I was speaking to someone, a friend of mine, and he's a lawyer, and I didn't realize quite what he had been through, but he had spent 11 years with one firm. He never got anywhere near the top. Then when he joined a smaller firm, he's been there 15 years now, and they promised him as he got there that he would be on a fast track to equity partner. He's still waiting on that promise to be delivered. He said I could use his name, but I won't. But it's 26 years, and you have ability, you're a good person, you have a family, you have a nice home, but still you're not good enough to sit at the table. Madam Speaker, I've often said in this House, I do not believe that our people should be content with sitting on the floor waiting on crumbs from the table. I believe that we are good enough. We proved it on the seas. We proved it every time that we're given the opportunity as pilots or whatever, managers. You give Caymanians a chance, those who want to work and those who are willing to put in the extra time, because I can tell you right now, Madam Speaker, an accountant or lawyer who you see come to work at 9 in the morning and leave at 5, they're not going to make partner. It's not going to happen. As the Deputy Governor said when he debated, 11:30 was a kind of a normal time to get home at night, and 7:30 was considered going home early. And that's no lie. That effort, that grunt work, that photocopying, that proofreading, that filing, every one of us who did anything around the financial industry are experts at all of those things, because that's part of paying your dues. That's the way they see it. But that's okay. But give us an opportunity all the way up the ladder. If we fail, then penalize us. But otherwise, Madam Speaker, I believe that we need to really, and I say to the law firms, shame that it has come to this point. Shame on you. And I also say to the law firms, those brave people who stood up against you, if we hear of them being victimized, I can assure you, you'll see further action from this Legislative Assembly. So they're coming to the fore. I don't think it's going to hurt them as much as what has been said. To me, they are now protected, because if they suffer victimization after this, then it is for us to stand up even more. So, Madam Speaker, I think notice has been served in that regard. And I want to say also that those people will be remembered similar to those brave women in 1959 who stood up in this country and fought for the right to vote, when women could not vote, and made a landmark changing moment for these islands, where women's voices and feelings and emotions, and people like yourself and Minister Rivers are now here, Madam Clark, are all here because of those women. And these people that stood up against this type of victimization, this type of holding down, Madam Speaker, they will be remembered. Madam Speaker, the goose that laid the golden egg, we are not foolish enough to kill it. It would be silly. And when emotions run high, sometimes we can get a little reckless, but I'm glad that cooler heads prevail. We did all of our fighting in here and some behind the scenes, but I think we're at the point where tomorrow we will come to a consensus. We will produce a bill that is badly needed to control the profession, and we will see that Caymanians, I promise you that there will be an increase in equity partners. You will see people doing better, because I think that the law firms are certainly listening, and they must, if they mean any good to this island, because it is in their interest. If social decay sets in and we go to hell in a basket, they are involved in that. Although they can fly and they can move quickly, the flight of capital is real. And these days we know what happened back with the Bahamas and everything else. But Madam Speaker, at the same time, they have a lot invested here. They don't want to do that. They have a vested interest, in my opinion. A lot of them have become Caymanians, and they need to protect and offer our people a fair chance. So, Madam Speaker, I will repeat the 5th elected member from Georgetown, famous words, as he says, if not now, when? And if not us, who? Madam Speaker, I close my debate, and I thank you for this opportunity, although the hour is late, to state my position on this matter. Thank you very much.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I will recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just wish to thank all members of the House for their contributions to this important debate, and to say further to what I indicated at the start of my debate, that the House will not sit tomorrow. Instead, members will seek to reach some level of consensus with respect to the immense number of proposed amendments, in the hope that we can narrow the issues and return to the House on Friday morning to complete the wind up on this bill and to start taking it through the committee stages. Madam Speaker, I believe that some of my colleagues on the other side of this honorable House would wish to indicate their agreement to that approach. And so, Madam Speaker, I move the adjournment of this honorable House until 10 a.m. on Friday morning.
The fifth elected member from Georgetown.
Madam Speaker, I rise just to confirm those words from the Honorable Premier, that we have agreed with the government bench to come together tomorrow to review all amendments tabled in this House in good faith, with a view to finding consensus, or at least narrow the gap significantly. And I think that I'd like to thank the Honorable Deputy Speaker, Leader of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, and also the first elected member from the District of Georgetown, because again, as they usually show us, they've been around, they know a lot better than us how these things go, and they have that calming influence at points in time when we all need it. And I'd just like to congratulate all of us, Madam Speaker, tonight, because I think that for the first time in a few weeks, we actually all agree at the same time. And I look forward to tomorrow and entering into good faith negotiations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognize the member, third elected member from Westby.
Madam Speaker, thank you. The official opposition also have met and agreed on this line of attack on this bill. Thank you very much. And I too would like to echo what the fifth elected member from Georgetown said, that the elders and the cooler heads have prevailed, and let's hope it's better for people to come behind. Thank you.
I recognize first elected member from Bordentown.
I just wanted to say how proud I am of my colleagues here this evening, and to thank the Honorable Premier. I can tell him his stock went up pretty well, how I saw him operate this evening with all of us here and with the hope what's going to happen in another day or so. Thank you and congratulations all.
While we're thanking, I would ask indulgence of the House to let me express publicly thanks to Almighty God for answering a prayer that was put forward last night and tonight. The chair doesn't get involved, but in the interest of the country, I did take some time to put aside, and I want to thank God publicly for answering prayer. I put the question that the House be adjourned until 10 a.m. Friday morning. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The House is accordingly adjourned until 10 a.m. Friday morning.